All right. Welcome to the Redux version of a meta overview slideshow, which if you don't notice, read the initials. Metas come on a wide spectrum from completely pure, where all you are given are answers and you have nothing else and you have to combine them in some random ways in order to turn into a thing, all the way to shell, where shell you have a whole big puzzle and you're just kind of inserting answers into that to do anything. I am going to be talking almost exclusively about pure metas during this, because that's where a lot of the commonality is that you can talk about. With shells, it's more like just solving a regular puzzle, but without all the information. So, the element you have that you are trying to get out of any particular meta puzzle is an order and an extraction, which is the same as saying, for a given word or a given phrase, there's some set of letters in them and they occur in some particular order. So if you're going to create an English word, you need these two things. You need letters and you need them in a particular order. So we can talk about different ways of getting the order. So the order might just be given. In order to determine if the order is given, you can often compare this to other rounds in the same event. Are the puzzles alphabetized? Are there numbers that are non-consecutive somewhere else but are consecutive where you're being given them? If so, you probably should pay attention to the order the puzzles are in and use those answers in that order. If you're not sure, assume that the order provider does matter. You assume that until you come across something that gives you a new ordering. And usually that new ordering is going to be kind of an obvious thing. So, the order can also come from puzzle info. So it can come from puzzle title, like one in the 20,000 Puzzles Under the Sea, where the puzzle titles were all like one word off of Goosebumps, the first 7 Goosebump books. That is where the title is kind of giving you the order, even a little indirectly. It can come from flavor text, which is important if you're just a solver and you give that information to the folks doing the meta. It sometimes gives you a thing like this happened and this happened. There's a bit of a puzzle just in the flavor text of puzzles for the round. Or it can come from kind of a quote-unquote random piece of data, like in the 2018 Rage Hunt, or 2018 Inside Out Hunt. The Rage puzzles had this symbol in the corner of each puzzle, and it was some quantity of Rage meter that was being filled up, and you ordered those puzzles by the amount of the Rage meter. So keep an eye out for those. If you're ever solving a meta, looking at the puzzles, seeing if there's something that's different across them is usually a good idea. So the order can come from the letter length. Here you have unique lengths from 4 to 14, I think. This is the 2017 fighter meta from the D&D year. It's whenever people do order it by letter length, it is consecutive numbers. You're not going to have a 3-word thing and then a 5-word thing and a 7-word thing and an 8-word and 10-word, and you're supposed to order that by length. That is not going to be done by anyone who knows what they're doing in writing meta puzzles. It needs to be consecutive. That said, you might not have all of them, and so determining whether you're going to have a consecutive or not is not necessarily a clear thing. Or where the start is or where the end is, you might not have that information. You can order alphabetic by answer. This is the same thing I was talking about yesterday with the writing. It needs to be consecutive letters again, unique and consecutive, or it might be in the second letter. If every single answer starts with a B, and they did like B-A, B-E, B-I, B-O, B-U, that's also a valid ordering. We have an example here where it's not the beginning of the alphabet or not the vowels like I just described. If this happens, I haven't seen it a bunch. In this particular case, it had a reason for it. The outside of this is a J and an R, and this entire meta relied on the letters J and R. So they were giving us a hint to look at J, R, and specifically to look at what's between J and R by giving us a consecutive set from K to Q. So the order might be where you're just combining things and running them through some chain. So here, the last 3 letters of manifesto are the first 3 letters of stop codon, and the last 3 letters of stop codon are the first 3 letters of don't worry baby, and you just keep going that way, and this provides this kind of almost cyclic order. Oftentimes, it won't be a true cycle. Sometimes it is, and you need to figure out where the actual start is. But in this case, you didn't. The first one didn't overlap 3, and the last one also didn't overlap 3. You can have a very non-direct ordering. So everything previously, the order mattered from the answers or the titles or whatever. In this case, the answers are these rows. The order is in the columns. So they're all 10-letter answers, and when you have all 5 of them, the first letter of all of them has an overlap twice. The second column has an overlap twice. And now you're reading left to right across the letters of the answer, which is still an ordering. It is just not ordering of answers. It is ordering of a thing within the answers. So, moving on to the extraction part. You've got basic extraction, so you can read the first letters and get this. You can read the last letters and get that. You can diagonalize and solve it with your whole team. You can read the nth letters, in this case the second letters, and get the word rest. And usually when you're reading nth letters, there's some flavor text thing that talks to you about that. Or you can read middle letters and get Nabu, who is the Sumerian god of something or other. This took me about 3 minutes to write, so. You can look for letter patterns. This is also really common, especially in easier metas. If it's the sole repeated letter going on, there's a sole repeated letter in every single answer, that is probably signal, not noise. You can get a repeated bigram, which is a lot less likely to occur randomly. If you have it in more than 2 or 3 puzzles, it's probably the right thing to start looking at. You can have doubled letters where they're consecutive. Also tends to jump out. A good puzzle will not repeat other letters. In this case, I repeat the ends, but there is still the double E's. And if you don't notice what the blue letters spell, you might want to read them again. This same thing that I just did of pulling these letters might be an ordering if the letters you're pulling are consecutive. Or if your repeated bigram is like elements or states or something, you might end up using that pull that you did as an ordering based on what those things represent. You can also have a really complicated but consistent letter pattern. And in this case, this is the same one I showed earlier, the fighter meta. And there's this ABAA pattern that occurs in all of them. And so it's still a letter pattern. It's this ABAA occurs in every single answer somewhere. And in this particular case, you end up reading the B of that ABAA, ordered by the length that we talked about earlier, and you get this whole 1-2 combo. In this case, you end up with information that is not valuable to you at all, namely the letter that got repeated a bunch of times. That's okay. It's really difficult to write a puzzle where both those streams of data matter is really hard to write. And so if you have something that is providing you 2 streams of data, oftentimes only one of them will be meaningful. You can extract relevant letters where they don't become relevant or important until you've done something else. So what you've got here is the same thing of the manifesto and the STO overlapping with stop codon. And once you've done that, that trigram is now meaningful information. Now that you look at that trigram, you can read down the middle letters of those overlap trigrams and get the answer of tobacco. And in this particular case, they did a nice little thing, which was unnecessary, but makes it a lot more elegant, where that trigram at the beginning of one of them and the trigram at the end of one of them that were not involved in anything have a middle letter A and a middle letter Z telling you what order to read these in. Whereas otherwise you might read this just as easily as Okabot. And when you don't have all the answers, that becomes a little more complicated. So they give you this extra little elegance thing of here's the order. Yeah. And it makes those trigrams relevant. Whereas previously they did nothing because they did not overlap with anything and their middle letters didn't matter otherwise. So here it now matters. You can also get, so here what we have are answers that are reading across and answers that are reading down. And you could form this little grid of them. And once you form this grid, reading the diagonals is relevant. Until you form the grid, it was meaningless. Reading like the first letter of Padawan happened to be the first letter of Peridot, and the 5th letter of Down Pat being the 5th letter of Whippet, that's not meaningful unless you've managed to form this grid. But once you've done that, that diagonal is a really logical place to read it, and the letters become relevant at that point. Again, like the ordering, there might be random information on the puzzle that gives you what you need. So in this case, it was the same hunt, actually. The sadness puzzles had a different number of lines in the border around the puzzle titles when you're looking at the puzzle page. And in this case, they were not unique, they were not consecutive, and so they're an index rather than an ordering. When they're unique and consecutive, they're probably an ordering, or you use it for diagonalization, and therefore it's both. But in this case, when they're non-unique, you're using it as an index, the ordering was given, and you just index into the answer based on the number of lines there. But wait, there's more. You can start to pair things together. So on the left here, I haven't actually given you the rest. So on the left here, what you have is all of the answers in alphabetic order for a particular event, round. And if you notice, all of the links of these answers come in pairs. There are 2 6-letter answers, there are 2 7-letter answers, there are 2 8-letter answers, etc. So you can pair those things up. And if you've done that, to give you a little extra signal that you've done the right thing, in each of those pairs, one of the answers has exactly 3 O's and no other vowel. This is a circus line meta. It's a 3-ring circus. You use where those O's are in one to read letters from the other one. So look at where the O's are in Cocoon and pull the letters out of Medley. And the lengths of these were unique, and so you got 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and that was your ordering for those trigrams that you pulled out, and it gave you the answer of elephant in a tutu. And so here, nothing really worked until you paired things together. And once you paired things together, you could both do an ordering and you could do an extraction. You could instead get 2-word answers. So these were all of the meta answers in the Civilization round back in video games. They formed a super meta. Here you have every single word is 2 words that usually mean something. You should pay attention to one word or another and potentially treat them differently. In this particular case, one of those words is actually a French word, and you could translate it to English, and the English translation has the exact same length as the other word that existed and overlaps in a single letter in common. This is one of the tightest constructions of a meta I've ever seen in my life. It is amazing. There's a reason why the answer is orange, which was not thematic whatsoever. I bet that there are not that many more 2-word answers that make sense that allow them to do anything here. But so this is what happened. This is a thing you can do with 2-word answers. Pick one of the words and treat them a particular way. Do something else with the other word. You can also combine the title with the answers. I put title in quotation marks here because in this particular example, it's not the title so much as it is a robot that was associated with every puzzle. So the puzzle title was not Terminator, but there was a robot associated with the puzzle that is the Terminator. And then you took those and you associated with your answers. They were all the same length. And once they're all the same length, looking for, like, in this particular case, where do they overlap letters was the relevant thing. In the circus line meta, it was where's the O's in the thing. And so you can extract that. In this case, it went further. This was actually a bit of a shell meta. This was just kind of a pure part to it before you took these 4 letters and turned them into a different thing. So you're not going to be able to read anything off of this. So kind of going a little more into things. Association is the most common thing you're going to see in metapuzzles, especially mystery hunt style metapuzzles. What you're doing is taking your answers and trying to associate them to something else. And you can do that in a whole mess of ways that I'm going to get into. They're almost always a thematic set of things that you were trying to match them to, whatever the theme of that meta is. The new thing that you get, it might be for an order, it might be for an extraction. It tends to fall out naturally once you have discovered that set. If we're at Mystery Hunt and you figured out what the set association is and you can't figure out how to keep going, don't worry, someone's going to be able to do it pretty quick. You've done the hard thing. Way to go if you've managed to do that set. It also might apply to the puzzle titles. It's a little rarer, but like that Goosebumps example I mentioned earlier, the association was in the puzzle titles, not in the answers. So, different ways of doing association. So we can do direct association. Here, all of the words on the left are the answers. These are all the, I always forget, the collective nouns of the things on the right. So it's a mischief of mice, just like it would be a pride of lions. And once you've done that, once you figure that out, the order was provided and you're just reading the first letters of the animals. Very simple order, very simple extraction, but you had to do this set identification and convert the answers in order to go anywhere with it. You can have things hidden within answers. So in this case, what you had were aliens hidden within the answers. So Alf Franken has Alf hiding within it. Lavender has Ender. It's not actually alien. It's a science fiction thing. This was a puzzle related to Homeworld, the video game Homeworld. And so what you actually had to do, once you did this, once you found this identification, this set that it relates to, it gives you an ordering. I've kind of given it to you here in the ordering so it's more obvious. Alf starts at index position 1. He-Man starts at index position 2. Very natural ordering. You then had to look at, because it's a Homeworld thing, you had to look at the homeworlds of each of these characters. That's where you get Earth. They're not actually aliens. He-Man's not really an alien either. But you look at their homeworlds and you pull the answer out of that. I think you just read first letters or something once you had those. It can be the start and the end. This was from the Inside Out one as well. This wasn't everything, but this was an important thing that we had to figure out. And once we kind of made some connections here, if you look at the start and end of these, you can get things that are either nuts or bolts. And we were very good on Rage at figuring out start and end gives us a word. But until we got the set association to nuts and bolts, we were unable to finish solving the meta. So like you've got a Brazil nut, you've got the Chevy Bolt, etc. It can jump around. This is not something I've seen a ton, but it has come up. In this case, the green ones are being read left to right. The red ones are being read right to left. You have the numbers 1 through 10 hidden inside the answers. Odd numbers go to the right. Even numbers go to the left. Once we found those, it was very straightforward. Very obvious ordering, 1 through 10. And because one of them went to the right and the other went to the left, it told you to take first letters of the odd ones and and last letters of the even ones, and it spelled out I don't quite remember, poles reverse or something. Pole shift. But it was really easy once we figured out, well, Leatherette has a 3 in it and Axis has a 6 going backwards in it, etc. Consonancies are not something you're going to see a ton of. This is an example of something that doesn't fit in the previous things that are much more common. So there are going to be random things. Here it's a consonancy. Americares is all of the same consonants as Mercury, except for one of the consonants. And Lovins is all the same ones as Venus, except for one of the consonants. And so figuring out this association with the planets was the key break-in for this meta. And once you did that, it was read those other letters. The ordering is obviously planet ordering. You read those other letters, you insert the 2 vowels because everything we've been doing is with consonants, and you get slingshots. Kind of easy once we've figured out this consonancy with the things. This is really common. Anagram and or replace or add or subtract a letter and end up with some other set. So in this particular example, we are not anagramming at all. We are just removing a letter from the answer. And these are all the layers of the atmosphere. So this was the ATM meta, the ATM-osphere, the atmosphere. We have the exosphere, the thermosphere, the mesosphere, stratosphere, troposphere. And then you just very simply read the letter that you removed to get that, and you had an ordering because the atmosphere is in layers. This is one that is kind of hard to notice. There's short answers. Short answers tend to be difficult to do anything with. One thing to key in on here is that it's the RAM and not just RAM. Anytime they give you a the or an a in an answer, and it's not like the title of a book where that obviously belongs, there's a reason they gave that to you, and you can try and key in on that and see where you can go with it. But doing this kind of thing is really common. If you take your answers and you just start I want to anagram this, and does it turn into another word? Or drop one of the letters in it, and does it turn into another word? Or add a letter, and does it turn into another word? If you can do that, and it's like, oh, this is a word, I recognize this word, and you can do it again with another answer, and it's from the same set, you've probably broken the meta. So here's an example where you are replacing a letter and doing that. So all of these answers replace a letter, and you get a member of the Fellowship of the Ring. This was the Triforce of Fellowship meta. And so again, it's thematic, right? You're not doing this randomly. You're trying out the things randomly, but like once you get on the right thing, this is one where like if you took one of these answers and replaced a letter and anagrammed and got a member of the Fellowship of the Ring, I don't need to hear a second one. You did it. That is such a strong thematic thing that you have done the right thing. And in this case, the order was provided, which threw us off for a little when we were doing it because we didn't have all these answers and we were trying to figure out like, oh, well, what's the order in the movie where they like join the Fellowship? Unnecessary. So you can do kind of a different track now. You can have puzzles where you do a consistent modification, and it needs to be consistent. Do not just replace a letter and get a new word and it doesn't form a set, or you're just doing it because it forms another word. If you replaced a letter and everything with the same letter, you always could replace this letter with an O. That might be meaningful. If you could replace one vowel with another vowel, not actually meaningful. In this case, you could replace one letter with the word red. And if you could do that, you could do that in one spot with every single one of these, and now you've got this thing where like the letter you replace is the letter you're extracting. There was a different way of ordering it here that I won't get into, but it's this consistent modification of you can always replace red. And this was the witch hunt meta. It was the red scare. That's the thematic elements that goes on here. You can also have a consistent modification that's kind of very different than that. In this case, it's all two-word answers. What we noticed early when we were solving this was that they were all within one length. So like bated breath is a 5-letter and a 6-letter word. And all of them, those lengths are within one of each other. In this case, you could add a letter to one of the words to get another word. To the shorter word to get another word. But it had to be consistent. We were actually doing this a lot with a random letter, and we weren't getting anywhere. But you could do it with just adding the letter H over and over and over again. And this was the My and Fair Lady thing, and there's something that I didn't actually recognize of My Fair Lady and not pronouncing a particular thing.
It's not pronouncing H's.
Not pronouncing H's. Here, that's not what the H's really are, but that's why it's H's in this case. And once you did that, it was easy. You looked at what the matching letter of that H was, and you extracted those letters, and this was given in order. So the short of it, I talked about how you need an order and an extraction. You're almost never looking for what's the order, what's the extraction. You're looking for, can I associate this with some set, or can I find some letter patterns that are going on? That is going to cover 90+% of metas that you're going to see probably. So that is the end of the talk. I do have a practice thing for people who weren't here last year. These are meta puzzles that I wrote within a single puzzle where you had to do this word search thing, and it broke up into these different sections, and we ended up with these. They kind of ranged the gamut because I wrote them all for one puzzle. I would recommend we don't keep recording. I don't know if you want to cut off now or later. People who didn't see this last year, if you want to try and solve these, I will leave them up and you can group solve them.
I was not here last year.
I think like half the people here have not seen it. But yeah, that's talk.